Over the past few months, Ukraine has been pounding Crimea with aerial strikes. Drones and missiles fly over the Black Sea to take out key targets. Russia expects that. It has air defenses set up to counter Ukraine's aerial assaults, even if those defenses aren't performing that well. But there's something that Russia never expected. Ukraine pulling off a night raid deep in Crimea that ended in the total annihilation of a vital component of the region's air defenses. Ukraine snuck in during the night to punch a hole in Russia's air defenses. Now, Crimea is one step closer to falling back into Ukraine's hands. On August 12th, United 24 media reported that Ukraine's Special Operations Forces, or SSO, have claimed that they managed to destroy a Russian TRLK-10 Scala M radar system in a daring strike conducted 2 days earlier on the night of August 9th-10th. That alone wouldn't be all that newsworthy. Taking out a radar is always good news, but doing so on Russian-occupied territory inside the Ukrainian mainland is almost par for the course at this point in the war. But the SSO didn't hit a target on the mainland. It penetrated deep into Crimea under the cover of night to take out a radar system that's vital to Russia's aerial assaults and its air defenses. United 24 says that the SSO carried out this daring operation with the help of units from the resistance movement branch of the organization. Not a lot is known about this branch. That's by design. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, or MOD, says that the resistance movement is part of the SSO that's responsible for establishing networks of Ukrainian agents deep within Russian-occupied territory. Those agents are coordinated by the resistance movement, which helps them to carry out sabotage operations, destroy enemy equipment, and ultimately liberate Ukrainian territory from the Russian occupiers. That's all Ukraine's MOD is willing to tell us, but even that short description may give us some insight into what Ukraine pulled off on the night of August 9th-10th. Typically, when we hear about successful strikes against Crimea, they're strikes conducted using drones or missiles. Aerial assaults that Russia usually sees coming but fails to defend against. But that's not how the resistance movement operates. Based on the MOD's description, we can assume that Ukraine managed to sneak some of its agents into Crimea right under Russia's noses. Those agents may have been in Crimea for weeks, scoping out targets and feeding back information to their superiors. When the Scala M was located, the order may have been given: destroy it. The nighttime raid followed as Ukraine's resistance movement agents conducted a strike behind enemy lines that Russia never saw coming. Of course, this is all speculation. An organization as secretive as the SSO is never going to give the full game away, especially because it knows that information is the currency of war. The more Russia can learn from loose Ukrainian lips, the better it can prepare for future attacks that might use what happened on August 10th as a blueprint. Euromaidan Press highlights this secrecy in its report on Ukraine's daring strike, noting that the SSO has done nothing more than confirm that the strike happened. The group didn't disclose what weapons, systems, or soldiers it used to destroy the Russian radar, so any information beyond that confirmation is pure speculation, based on what Ukraine's MOD claims the resistance movement does. However, we do at least have some details about where the strike took place. Euromaidan Press says that Ukraine's operatives took out the Scala M in a settlement named Abrikosivka. Even then, there's still an element of confusion. There are two Abrikosivka settlements in Crimea, Euromaidan Press says. One is on the peninsula's west coast within the Yevpatoria district. The other is in the east, located somewhere inside Feodosia. The SSO isn't saying which of these two locations it hit. Frankly, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that the strike has been confirmed, and Ukraine just destroyed a key Russian radar system. The SSO even took to Facebook to announce the strike, though again it provided few details other than that the strike happened. The Special Operations Forces destroyed the powerful radar on TOT-AR Crimea, the Post declared. On the night from 9 to 10 of August 2025, the units of the Movement of Resistance of the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed the stationary track radio location complex TRLK-10 Scala M in MP Apricot, TOT-AR Crimea. MP Apricot appears to be a reference to Abrikosivka. Beyond that, the statement didn't provide any more details about how Ukraine carried out this strike. As for Russia, it's not saying much either. The country's MOD has released a statement claiming that Crimea's air defense system shot down 15 drones over Crimea on the same night as Ukraine's raid. It appears not all of the drones Ukraine sent were taken out, though, as United 24 reports that citizens of the city of Saki reported explosions in their vicinity. As for an attack on a radar system, the Russian MOD is characteristically quiet. It rarely acknowledges the destruction of military equipment unless the attack is so large that Russia believes it can frame the strike as terroristic. That's not what happened on August 10th. The SSO was quiet, precise. It snuck into Crimea and took out a radar system right under Russia's collective nose, and there was nothing that the Russian troops stationed in Crimea could do about it. Still, the Russian MOD's mention of drones raises some other possibilities about how Ukraine might have pulled this radar destruction off. The first and most obvious of these possibilities is that it was a Ukrainian drone that touched down on Abrikosivka on August 10th, taking a Scala M radar system with it. That could have happened, though this isn't the sort of operation that would require the SSO's resistance movement units and their networks of covert operatives. The second possibility more closely aligns with what we believe the resistance movement's modus operandi to be. Perhaps the 15 drones that Russia's MOD managed to shoot down over Crimea were never intended to hit any targets. At least one seems to have broken through in Saki, but that was never the goal. Instead, Ukraine may have launched its drones to distract Russia's air defenses, putting its troops on high alert for follow-up drone strikes. With that distraction, resistance movement operatives did their work on the ground, sabotaging the Scala M and escaping under the cover of night as Russia focused on the drones. Again, this is speculation. The SSO isn't going to reveal what happened on August 10th outside of confirming that a Scala M has been destroyed. Speaking of the Scala M, the SSO's Facebook statement provided some insight into why this particular system was targeted. TRLK-10 Scala M is a Soviet-Russian track radio location complex that includes both primary and secondary capabilities of detection of aerial targets, the statement reads. It's designed to control air traffic in the sky, in particular on routes and in approach areas, making it an essential component of the air traffic management system. Radar action radius up to 350 kilometers. 350 kilometers is equivalent to about 217 miles. That's more than enough to cover much of the Black Sea, separating the Crimean Peninsula from mainland Ukraine. As the US Naval Institute says, the greatest east-to-west distance within the Black Sea is 730 miles. However, that covers the portion of the sea that extends between Bulgaria and Georgia. The north-to-south dimension, which is far more relevant to Ukraine, is just 160 miles. While it's inaccurate to say that the Scala M provides radar coverage for all of the Black Sea, it appears the radar has a large enough range to cover the portions of the waterway that matter. Beyond that information, the Scala M is almost as secretive as the SSO operation designed to destroy it. Any technical documentation that might explain its capabilities in more detail isn't locatable on the internet, as it's likely kept under lock and key inside Russia. We do know that the radar was built during the Soviet era, making it yet another example of Putin relying on Russia's old equipment to fight against Ukraine. However, it's unlikely that the Scala M was transferred to Crimea specifically for the war. The odds are higher that it was always there. After all, Ukraine is a former Soviet territory. The Scala M, the SSO just destroyed, may have been standing in Crimea for decades. If that's the case, it explains why the SSO might have launched a ground assault using resistance movement operatives. If the Scala M's location was known thanks to Soviet-era documents inside Ukraine, planning an operation to take it out becomes far easier. Whatever the case may be, the SSO says that the radar is now little more than mangled metal and dust. And that brings us to why this strike matters in the wider context of the Ukraine war. The SSO's Facebook statement provides a big hint when it refers to the Scala M as a system used for air traffic management. The same post adds, destroying the said radar will significantly weaken the use of anti-aircraft used by the occupiers to affect civilian infrastructure and civilians. Well, that seems like a slightly muddled statement. Anti-aircraft weapons aren't used to target Ukrainian civilians. It does reveal that the destruction of this radar achieves two goals for Ukraine: weakening Russia's ability to use aerial strikes to hit Ukraine and prevent Russia from detecting incoming aerial assaults conducted by Ukraine. Starting with the first of those achieved goals, Russia has been using occupied Crimea to coordinate and launch aerial assaults against the Ukrainian mainland ever since Putin launched his full-scale invasion in February 2022. We know that because Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty, or RFE-RL, confirmed that air bases in Russia, Belarus and Crimea were all being used to strike Ukraine way back in March 2022. During the first few weeks of the Ukraine war, Russia dominated the skies over Ukraine, RFE-RL reported. Civil and military infrastructure was being targeted by missiles and bombs, with Russian aircraft also dropping paratroopers into Ukraine to secure key territory. Of course, we now know that the Russian aircraft over Ukraine are nowhere to be seen because the aerial dominance Russia was believed to have was a smokescreen. In March 2022, Russia was flying as many as 200 sorties per day into the war. Now it's flying practically none, preferring instead to launch missiles and bombs from airfields within Russian territory. Ukraine destroying 421 Russian aircraft and 340 helicopters since the beginning of the war had little something to do with that change in strategy. Still, in March 2022, Russia believed that it could use its much larger air force to rule the skies over Ukraine. RFE-RL reported that Crimea was a problem because Russia was sending fighter jets from air bases on the peninsula to the Lviv region of Ukraine. The same outlet also noted that the head of the Center of Military Legal Studies in Kyiv, Oleksandr Musyenko, was claiming that Russia was using Tupolev bombers packed with Kh-101 cruise missiles to attack Ukraine. Those bombers may not be heading into Ukrainian territory anymore, but missiles from Crimea have remained an ever-present thorn in Ukraine's side. Fast forward to June 29, 2025, and the New Voice of Ukraine was reporting that Russia had launched a ballistic missile attack against the Ukrainian settlement of Mykolaiv, That strike was a relative rarity, as the region's governor, Vitaly Kim, pointed out at the time. At night, the enemy attacked Mykolaiv with ballistic missiles. There were 6 launches from Crimea. Honestly, I thought there were 4, because 2 were destroyed by our ATACMS, but apparently they brought in 2 more, and all of them were fired on Mykolaiv. 3 had cluster warheads, 3 were standard. It's been a while since we've seen anything like this, Kim said of the attack. The message is clear: missiles are still being launched at Ukraine from Crimea. And to make matters worse, Iscanda M missiles may be counted among Crimea's arsenal. That's according to Canal 13, which reported in May that Russia was using Crimea as a launching pad for these devastating weapons. It quoted Dmitry Pletenchuk, who is a spokesman for the Ukrainian Navy, as stating, "Russia is using the temporarily occupied Crimea as a launch pad for Iscanda M missiles, an operational tactical complex. By using it, they are trying to reduce the distance and, accordingly, the flight time in order to reduce the possibility of our reaction, to reduce it. Unfortunately, until these territories are liberated, they will be used by the enemy in this way." Crimea hasn't been liberated, at least not yet. However, the SSO's strike on the Scala M radar system suddenly makes a lot more sense. Now we know the role that piece of equipment plays in helping Russia to direct air traffic. The missiles Russia is firing at Ukraine via Crimea need to be coordinated, so do the aircraft that Russia uses to fire these missiles. Without a radar system helping Russia to manage air traffic in Crimea and the Black Sea, it's possible for crashes to occur or missiles to fly straight into the paths of Russian aircraft that are already in the skies. If that seems far-fetched, just remember this: Russia has managed to accidentally bomb itself 100 times during the first 7 months of 2025. You can learn how and why this is happening in our video, covering Russia's unintentional self-destruction. But the point being made here is that having the wrong radar systems in place, or no radar systems at all, can lead to catastrophic mistakes. Ukraine will be hoping that the loss of a Scala M will be enough to force a slowdown in Russia's missile strikes from Crimea. After all, the SSO notes in its statement, most of these missiles aren't being launched at legitimate military targets. Instead, Russia is using them to devastate Ukraine's cities, killing thousands of civilians in the process. The exact numbers vary depending on the source, though they all add up to Russia adopting a monstrous strategy in which it deliberately targets civilians. According to Statista, the period between February 24, 2022 and May 31, 2025 has seen Russia kill 13,341 Ukrainian civilians, along with injuring 32,744 more. That amounts to about 342 deaths and 839 injuries per month, most of which are caused by Russian missiles and bombs. Bear in mind that these are also only the deaths that the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, or OHCHR, has managed to verify. There may be many more. The United Nations somewhat expanded on these figures in a June 30th article, noting that 986 Ukrainian civilians died and 4,807 were injured between December 1, 2024 and May 31, 2025. That represented a 37% increase over the same period the previous year, and it's only been getting worse. A July 10th OHCHR article revealed that Russia killed 232 people and injured another 1,343 in June 2025 alone. That was the highest civilian kill count Russia's forces have achieved in the last 3.5 years. None of these deaths are accidental. Russia's aerial assaults against Ukraine's cities have a purpose, as the Atlantic Council explained in a May article. In addition to killing and injuring civilians, Russian aerial attacks also create untenable living conditions for the wider civilian population. They leave people traumatized and fuel intense feelings of insecurity while disrupting access to heating, power, water, healthcare, and other essential resources, the council says. These assaults are about terrorizing Ukraine's people, nothing more. Putin is trying to break the collective Ukrainian morale, and he's having an impact. Russia's invasion has forced 10.6 million people to relocate and pushed 12.7 million people into requiring humanitarian assistance. The invasion to conquer Ukraine has turned into a war of terror against its civilians. Of course, taking out a single Scala M air control system in Crimea isn't going to stop this indiscriminate killing, but it will put a small dent in Russia's ability to launch aerial assaults from Crimea. Bit by bit, Ukraine is taking out these types of systems to relieve pressure. Let's put it this way: if the destruction of the Scala M on August 10th means that even one Russian missile can no longer reach a Ukrainian city, that's an important victory for the SSO. We also have to look at the other side of the coin, which brings us to Ukraine's other goal with its nighttime raid. A radar system that tracks air traffic isn't just used by Russia to maintain control over its own aerial forces. Such systems can also track incoming Ukrainian drones, missiles, and other aerial threats. At least the Scala M could, if it wasn't destroyed. Ukraine has been intensifying its drone assaults against Crimea in 2025, as evidenced by the Russian MOD claiming to have shot down 15 unmanned aerial vehicles on the night the Scala M was taken out. Back in May, Defense Express reported that Ukraine launched its largest ever aerial strike against Crimea. Russia claimed to have shot down 20 drones over the Black Sea and about 100 over Crimea itself. Satellite images and video of the aftermath showed that Ukraine hit several targets with this record-breaking strike. A little under 2 months later, Ukraine launched another drone assault, this time targeting some of Russia's Crimean aerial assets. Ammunition depots and air defense equipment were hit, as were a trio of helicopters at Mi-8, Mi-26, and Mi-28, according to Ukraine's security service. Attacks like these are being made possible because Ukraine is focusing a ton of its effort on destroying radar stations and similar locations in and around Crimea. There had already been 2 of these types of attacks in August before the SSO revealed that it had taken out the Scala M. On August 7th, the Kyiv Independent reported that a Ukrainian drone strike deployed a Podlik K1, 96L6E, and Nebo SVU, all of which are radar systems Russia uses to identify and track incoming aerial threats from Crimea. 3 days later, the Eurasian Times said that Ukraine's Ghost special unit had managed to destroy a 98L6 Yensei radar, which is used as part of Russia's cutting-edge S-500 air defense system. The Scala M being added to the list shows us that there's a purpose to these radar site strikes. Ukraine is carving out safe aerial corridors over the Black Sea and into Crimea. It's been doing it for months, and the creation of those corridors is what's allowing Ukraine to conduct larger and more damaging drone strikes against Crimea than it has at any other point in the war. It's a chip damage approach akin to the one Ukraine is taking to prevent Russia from killing so many of its civilians. In the civilian death case, the destruction of an air traffic control radar takes one more bite to add to the many that are already weakening Russia's ability to attack Ukraine from Crimea. When it comes to Ukraine launching attacks of its own, one destroyed Scala M may be enough for a handful of drones to bypass Russia's air defenses to take out another critical target. Ultimately, retaking Crimea is Ukraine's goal. The August 10th strike takes Ukraine one small step closer to achieving that goal. But even a small step is important. As Ukraine keeps conducting these strikes, what once seemed like an impossible journey to the reclamation of Crimea starts looking like a distinct possibility. If you'd like to learn more about what Ukraine is doing in Crimea, we've published a video covering the August 7th strike we mentioned earlier in far more detail. Check it out if you want to dig into what Ukraine achieved with that attack. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering Ukraine's push to retake Crimea. And thank you, as always, for watching.